Based on true events, Part 1. Here is a longer and more terrifying horror story about a psychiatric hospital filled with fear and horror. The abandoned psychiatric hospital sat on the outskirts of town, a hulking, crumbling monument to the unspeakable horrors that had taken place within its walls. Its twisted hallways and decaying rooms were said to be haunted by the ghosts of the tortured souls who had once called it home. A group of young urban explorers, drawn to the abandoned asylum by morbid curiosity and a thirst for adventure, decided to venture inside. As they made their way through the dark and twisted corridors, they were overcome by an oppressive sense of dread that seemed to seep from the very walls themselves. The air was thick with the stench of decay and rot, and the shadows seemed to writhe and twist like living things. Strange whispers echoed through the halls, and the explorers felt as though they were being watched by something malevolent. One of the explorers, a young woman named Emily, felt a sudden and overwhelming sense of terror grip her heart as they turned a corner and stumbled upon a room that was alive with activity. Nurses in crisp white uniforms bustled about, attending to patients who writhed and screamed in agony on their beds. But as the explorers drew closer, they realized with mounting horror that something was terribly wrong. The nurses' eyes glowed with a mad, feverish intensity, and their hands were stained with blood. Before Emily could react, the nurses descended upon her, dragging her kicking and screaming into a nearby room. There, they strapped her to a bed and began to perform unspeakable experiments on her, their laughter ringing in her ears like a death knell. Days turned into weeks as Emily was subjected to the twisted whims of her captors. Her mind shattered by the relentless onslaught of horror she was forced to endure, she became a shell of her former self, her body covered in scars and bruises. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, the doors of the hospital swung open, and a group of police officers stormed inside, guns drawn. They found Emily lying in a corner, barely alive, her body broken and twisted beyond recognition. The officers arrested the nurses and led them away in chains, but as they were being taken into custody, one of them turned to Emily and whispered, "You'll never escape. We'll always be watching you." Despite being rescued from the hospital, Emily could never fully escape the trauma of what had happened to her. The memories of her ordeal haunted her day and night, driving her to the brink of madness. Years passed, and Emily tried to move on with her life, but the hospital's dark legacy continued to cast a long and terrifying shadow. She could still hear the screams of the tortured patients, the manic laughter of the mad nurses, and the whispered promises of revenge. And then, one night, she received a phone call from an unknown number. A voice on the other end of the line spoke just 3 words, "We're coming for you." Emily knew then that her nightmare was far from over. The hospital's ghosts still roamed free, and they hungered for her soul. I could feel my heart racing as I stared into her bloody eyes. It was like looking into the eyes of a demon. I tried to back away slowly, but my feet wouldn't budge. I was trapped, cornered in this dark and twisted place. The walls around me were covered in stains, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. I had stumbled into this place by accident, a long-abandoned mental hospital that had been rumored to be haunted for decades. I had always been fascinated by stories of the paranormal, but I had never truly believed in them. Until now. The woman in front of me was proof that there was something beyond our understanding in this world. As she slowly started to move towards me, I realized that I had to do something. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I was paralyzed with fear. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the woman disappeared from sight. I was alone in the darkness, but I could feel something watching me. I turned around, and there she was again, standing right behind me. I could feel her breath on my neck, and I knew that my time was running out. I closed my eyes and prayed for it to be over quickly. But when I opened them again, I found myself back in my own bed, drenched in sweat. It had all been a nightmare, but it felt so real. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, even though I was alone in my room. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew that I had stumbled onto something that I wasn't meant to see. The mental hospital was a place of unspeakable horrors, and I had barely scratched the surface of what lay hidden within its walls. As I lay there in bed, unable to sleep, I knew that I had to go back. I had to uncover the truth about what had happened in that place, no matter how terrifying it might be. And so, I made my decision. I would return to the mental hospital, face my fears, and confront the darkness that lay within.